So introducing Helen from Pictorial Meadows. They was very kind to supply all the wildflower meadow turf as you walk in on the flower beds, and in garden 7 just behind you, Ryan and Sunny. I'll let you kick off, Helen, and introduce yourself and the company.
Thanks, Ollie. So I'm Helen. I'm Head of Commercial Landscapes at Green Estate and Pictorial Meadows. I've actually come from quite an interesting kind of route. I started off in financial services, actually, and was learning how to be a financial advisor for a while and got really disillusioned with the whole industry. I went to retrain as landscape architect at the University of Sheffield. In being in the course, I found out about Green Estate and Pictorial Meadows. We were kind of taught, because Nigel Dunnett, who originally set up Pictorial Meadows, is a professor at the university. So we heard a lot about the urban meadows and the work the Green Estate had done, and ended up working at Green Estate through that. So I guess the position I've ended up in is very much a kind of combination of the kind of business and finance background that I have, as well as the horticultural knowledge that I then gained through the landscape course. Green Estate itself, while Pictorial Meadows is a limited company, Green Estate is a social enterprise. It's a really interesting kind of journey that the company's been on. It was originally set up in about 1999, I think, as a social environmental project in one of the most deprived wards in Sheffield, in the Manor and Castle ward. I think Roy Hattersley, one of the kind of Labour MPs that was around at the time, called it the most deprived ward in the UK. And it was set up to help regenerate the green spaces in that ward, to help trying to raise social aspirations. In 2003, it became a company in its own right, and the then CEO was looking at ways of funding the company and keeping it going. There's a lot of people who kind of work within the landscape team at Green Estate that have come through the University of Sheffield. We've got really good links with the department still. And Sue France, the original CEO, actually approached Nigel Dunnett and said, look, can we buy the majority of this company and run it in-house at Green Estate and use the income from Pictorial Meadows to help fund the ongoing kind of social enterprise work that we're doing within the local area. So that's kind of how Green Estate ended up majority owning kind of Pictorial Meadows seeds, and it's been run in-house ever since. Nigel Dunnett's still connected. He's still one of the shareholders, but and still helps with development of some of the seed mixers, as well as James Hitchmore, who some of you might have heard of. He's helped develop some of the perennial seed mixers. But yeah, Green Estate have kind of owned and managed the company in-house since 2003. So yeah, it's going a long way to kind of fund the nice stuff that happens up in the Manor and Castle ward of Sheffield. I think Sue's original kind of vision was to be the Chatsworth of the inner estate, and kind of you look kind of 20 odd years down the line and you kind of look, well, maybe she actually achieved that in some way, shape or form. It's kind of her legacy.
Can you tell us a little bit about how a pictorial meadow differs from another wildflower meadow?
Yeah, so I mean, it's got all the great benefits for wildlife and for carbon sequestration, and capturing rainwater, helping urban areas with the climate crisis, but it's also visually stunning. Nigel's original vision, he kind of went and looked at wildflowers all over the world, and his particular attraction, he saw the super bloom up in the hills in California, and was just like the emotional response that he had to seeing that kind of mass bloom of flowers was the thing that inspired him really to develop the company. And all of the seed mixers, from the annuals to the perennials to the turf, the designed mixers. So it's very much coming at it from a kind of horticultural design ethos. The species that are in there, the percentage of each of the species are all kind of carefully calculated. So you get this kind of successional flowering throughout the year, but really high impact, and it creates that emotional connection for people. So it's it's a planting for people as well as kind of wildlife and biodiversity and all.
Yeah, what sort of products are you seeing most popularity with at the minute?
I think at the minute it is probably the turf, especially in the kind of garden design and kind of landscaping, commercial landscaping arena, because it's an instant win for the contractors, especially if it's a capital funded project where all the money is put in at the beginning, and there's the contractor kind of basically does it, has a 12-month, 3-year defects period, and then they walk away from the scheme at the end of that period. They're able to show their clients instant impact with the turf, because they get a fully grown perennial meadow delivered straight to the door kind of thing. Whereas with the seeded mixers, although you can create a visually stunning meadow still, it takes kind of a 12 to 18 month period for the perennial meadows to establish, whereas the turf, it's delivered straight to your door. So I think that originally it was interesting, it was the annuals that we started out with, and that was the main kind of product, and we kind of had those in vast swathes. I brought the kind of catalogues up to the front with me because it's such a visual product, and most of the time when we do talks and presentations, we've got a screen behind us showing gorgeous pictures of the meadows, and that's the thing that you kind of talk about and go, look at this amazing meadow, and look at this.
We need
this
one
effect.
of them in-floor projectors, don't we, Angus?
Yeah, yeah, something for
Food for thought.
You know, it was done on cleared housing lands in Sheffield, and this was the kind of effect that just on vast swathes of land in socially deprived areas, and it kind of won over hearts and minds. You know, you'd got people who were really grumpy about the housing having been knocked down, and we were sowing these meadows, and they were like, well, what are you doing that for? You know, this is meant to be housing. We need houses. People are, you know, we're short on housing in these areas. And then within a couple of growing seasons of having the meadows there, they were all going, wow, you know, these are our meadows now, and they didn't want the housing anymore. And it was just, you know, it was that real kind of change, and that's that kind of emotional response that I'm kind of talking about, you know, that these meadows really create.
Obviously, the meadows are beautiful. There's no doubt about that. But also they are obviously incredibly important for biodiversity. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And also whether there are particular seed mixes that are better for biodiversity, whether it's better to have a perennial one, and if so, you know, whether there's a particular perennial meadow seed mix that you would recommend?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, that, actually. Because I think meadows in all the different guises are good for biodiversity. They're good for pollinators. We've been involved with various studies over the years, with Edinburgh University and Reading University, a pollinators project. That was about kind of 10, 15 years ago. And they looked at all the different pollinators visiting the meadows. And it's amazing that even though they're not, we've got a lot of native flowers in there, but they're not all native flowers. They've got, that's what helps with creating the high impact meadows. And the evidence that we've found from these research projects is that the pollinators, you know, like these meadows just over any meadow. I think it's really having the right meadow for the right situation. Each of the products have got their own benefits, I guess. The annuals are a great kind of starter product. If someone's not really had meadows before, if you've got a client who's a little bit uncertain, a little bit like, oh, well, they're a bit scruffy, I don't really, you know, like the idea of having a meadow in the garden. The annuals are a really great introductory product. So they do their stuff in that 12-month period in one growing season, and they just look stunning. And then the client's like, oh, well, you know, yeah, I'd like that on an ongoing basis. And so you can take them on this journey, and they have annuals for a few years. They get used to the idea of a meadow, and then you can maybe move on to either perennial seeds if you've got a long-term relationship with a customer, or, you know, go for something like the perennial turf that's that kind of longer-lasting thing.
And where can you know, a retail customer, if they wanted to start looking into the meadow turfs, where on your website have you got sections on your website where they can inform themselves of what turfs are best for what species, etc.?
Yeah, so we've got the website. There's a section for the annuals, there's a section for the perennial seed, and there's a section for the turf. We've got turfs for more shaded areas, the woodland edge turf. We've got things that are for more free draining soils, like the patchwork quilt, Indian summer, super pollinator. We've got turfs for green roofs that have got alpine and herbaceous species in that are used to that kind of impoverished soil kind of conditions. Things like echiums and verbascums that are used to growing up in mountains in Bulgaria and places like that. The whole range of turf. You can also download the brochure from the website so that you can take that to your customers. So yeah, it's all on there.
So you've got quite a diverse selection of turfs. Where are they all grown? Are they all done in the UK, and how are they grown?
Yes, they're all grown in the UK. We grow a certain amount on our own site where we kind of test out different species and different mixes, and if we've developed a new mix, we might grow a small percentage on our site just to see how it goes and do the research and development on there. If we're testing out a new material to grow the turf on, we might do it on our site so we can keep a close eye on it. And we've then got a few growers within the north of Sheffield at the moment, north of England at the moment, who grow it on larger scales, and we can do grow to order products for like thousands of square metres of turf. We're just doing a grow to order that's about 22,000 square metres of turf. Yeah, that's all got to be put in by April next year. So that's going to be a challenge for the team.
How many rolls do you fit on a pallet? How many square metres does this come on a pallet?
Around 48 square metres. It depends if it's really wet. If it's slightly drier, more can go on because it's based on like the weight. But it's around 48 square metres that'll fit on one pallet. And you can order anything from as little as 1 square metre up to thousands.
22,000.
22,000.
Can you talk us a little bit through the process of actually growing the meadow? So whether you're using turf or whether you're buying in bulk the quantity of seed, what do people need to do if they're preparing site for a meadow, and what's the maintenance after it's grown as well? Sorry, it's a big question. Yeah. It just talks through the whole process.
Okay, forgot all day. So the annuals are probably the ones that are the easiest for a customer to do from scratch. They just need to. We found that in areas where there's been like amenity grass grown, you probably get the best effect because there doesn't tend to be an annual weed seed bank in there. They just clear the area of grass, prepare the soil down to a fine tilth. Break it down to a fine tilth, and then hand broadcast the seed and lightly compact it into the surface. And for the annuals, that's pretty much it. Then weather depending, I mean, it's been awful this year. We've kind of really struggled to find a time to kind of sow annuals this spring. It's been terrible with the rain. But generally, within 6 to 8 weeks of sowing the annual seeds, the customer will be seeing those first flowers coming through, and then they will kind of flower right through to the autumn. The perennial seeds, again, you start from a clear earth. Generally in the autumn you would sow the perennials, so they've got time to overwinter, because there's some of the species that need some kind of cold stratification to actually break the germination. With the perennial seed mixes, there's a small annual content, so there's a bit of interest in the first year, because it really takes kind of 12 to 18 months for the perennial plants to really get going from seed. And over that 12 to 18 month period, the customer really needs to be tending to the meadow, giving it lots of attention, weeding out any inblown weed seed, weeding out any grasses, making sure the right plants are growing, managing out any overdominance, giving it a couple of cuts in the first year to help the roots kind of do the thing. The turf, from a customer's point of view, is probably the most straightforward. Just kind of clear the ground, it comes on the pallets, lay it out, and if it's laid in kind of the cooler autumn weather or really early spring when it's cooler, it doesn't need watering in. But you give it a quick water when it's laid down, but then, you know, it just does its stuff. If it's, you're kind of laying it this time of year, you're going to have to be watering it. But yeah, so that in terms of establishing a perennial meadow, the turf is really the easiest way for a customer, or for, you know, contractors. If you are just doing that upfront installation, you can just pop it down and walk away.
What is the base? Obviously, the turf, the substrate. What is that? What is the makeup of that?
So it's grown a bit like a potted plant. We lay plastic sheeting out on the soil, which isn't part of the product, but that's just what we use to kind of grow it on the ground. We then lay down a mat that's made up of recycled carpet fibres, and we've moved this year to a totally plastic free kind of matting, so we're moving towards being much more sustainable. It's something that all wildflower turf companies have kind of battled with over the, you know, the recent years, with wanting more sustainable and remove plastics and that kind of thing. So now we have a plastic-free matting that we're laying the turf onto. This matting lays down on the floor. We then lay past 100 compost, about a 50ml layer of that, and then spread the seed on top of it. We then do all the establishment operations in the field, and get the plants to a good size. It's then cut into strips and into squares just before being stacked onto the pallets, and then customers get a, you know, pre-grown perennial meadow straight to the door.
What about someone who has got a smaller garden? So obviously here we've got our 15 amazing show gardens that aren't large gardens, and you know, someone might approach a garden designer and say, actually, I want to have a meadow, but you think of a meadow being this huge expanse of, you know, a field of wildflowers, but actually you can have them in smaller spaces, can't you? What would you recommend for people wanting that in a smaller space?
Yeah, I suppose for pots, you can sow the annuals into pots.
We've got them in planters out the front, haven't we?
Yeah, so for the annuals, you can do it as small as, you know, window boxes, garden pots, that kind of thing. We run an annual kind of photo competition, and we get photos from people who've done it in little pots up to, you know, acres of fields, that kind of thing. In, you know, in borders in the front garden, in that kind of thing, just in small rectangular areas. Like I say, with the turf, it can be delivered anything from 1 square metre size. So, you know, the smallest gardens have you seen from is it garden number 6? I think that I think that's our Indian summer turf that's in there. That's just small little enclaves, and it's blended really well into the perennial planting behind it.
Looks lovely. One last question then, Helen. Where can people find you? If people want to go and have a look, where do they find you? Are you on social media, your website?
Yeah, we're on Instagram, LinkedIn, obviously the website. There's some brochures on the table out the back. You can submit inquiries through the website. We're based up in Sheffield, but we ship seeds across the country. We've got agents in Europe. You know, we ship turf up and down the country. We do consultation and have experts that will come out and advise on the meadows. If you've got a customer who's got a large area, you know, you can have like a combination of meadows. It might be that you've got the cheaper option of the seed at the back of an area in expanse, and then it's kind of lined with turf at the front and things like that. So yeah, just visit the website, get in contact. Yeah.
Hit the buy button. Thank you very much, Helen. It's
Thank you.
a pleasure having you down. Thank you very much.